World War I was one of the most brutal events of the last century. Known as the war to end all wars, it brought great changes that reached out beyond the Europe sphere. In this presentation, I will be giving a summary of the war through 12 images. Kaiser Wilhelm II. Wilhelm II was the second and last emperor of Germany. Wilhelm was very aggressive in terms of politics. His likings towards the Austrian Empire, who represented the old heritage of German culture, saw the end of the friendship between German His liking towards the Austrian Empire, who represented the old heritage of German culture, saw the end of the friendship between Germany and Russia, creating grounds for the Franco-Russian alliance of 1894. In addition, Wilhelm adopted Weltpolitik to turn Germany into a colonial power. However, this also caused tension between Germany and other European powers. Such examples are shown through the Moroccan crisis. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand, 28th of June 1914. On 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie visited the town of Sarajevo, Bosnia. But the problem was that the 28th of June was also the anniversary of the Serbs' defeat at Kosovo Polje and also St. Vitus's Day, which is a celebration for Slavic nationalists. As an act of nationalism, Gavrilo Princip and his co-conspirators chose to assassinate Franz Ferdinand during his visit in Sarajevo. This eventually led to the ultimatum of Austria-Hungary and the July Crisis. Trench warfare. After the war had started, due to the failure of the Schneiffeln Plan and other various reasons, the situation quickly became a stalemate. Trench conditions were terrible, with rats sprawling, dead bodies piling up and unburied, along with the constant fear of being shelled. These trenches were to become a norm across the battlefields of World War I. The British blockade of Germany. Almost immediately after the declaration of war, the British Navy started a blockade of the North Sea in order to stop German shipping and hopefully starve the Germans, since around a quarter of Germany's food were from imports. The English Channel was full of mines and patrolled while heavier ships were stationed at Scapa Flow to prevent northern access. Although initially Germany could still sustain itself through trade with neighboring countries or taking supplies from captured territories, the effects of the blockade began to show in 1916 through shortages of food, fuel, and inflation. The Gallipoli Offensive, 17th of February 1915. As the stalemate was developing in the Western Front, the Allies looked towards the east, in particular the Dardanelles Strait, which is crucial to link up the supply lines for the Russians. Thus, a beach assault was ordered on Gallipoli. However, after few initial successes, a stalemate began to grew just like the Western Front. Reinforcements were sent to Gallipoli, but there was still no sign of success. Eventually, the Allies decided to evacuate Gallipoli with an estimated death toll of 250,000 casualties by the end of the offensive. The Armenian Genocide, 24th of April 1915. Tension between the Ottomans and the Armenians long existed before World War I, as the Ottoman Empire began to collapse and Armenian nationalism was rising. During the war, the Ottomans feared that the Christian Armenians would help the Christian Russians, which was partly true as ethnic Armenians were present in the Russian army. These Armenians became a scapegoat for the losses of men and land. Armenian villages were burnt. Entire populations were gathered up and sent to the desert to die. Over 1.5 million Armenians were killed by the end. The Battle of Verdun, 21st of February 1916. The Battle of Verdun began with a 9-hour artillery barrage on a 20-kilometer front with an estimated amount of 1 million shells fired. The Germans' advancements were quick, and on the 25th, they were only 2 miles from Verdun. The French knew that the fall of Verdun would greatly weaken the morale and ordered it to be defended until the last man. The Battle of Verdun became a battle of attrition, with no sides gaining clear advantage. Eventually, the Germans gave up on Verdun, but with a death toll of 280,000 dead. Women in industry. A total war like World War I demanded a rapid growth of industry to keep up with the production demands. In many countries, this meant women joined the workforce as more and more men were to leave and join the army. However, not all likes this idea despite the needs. Employers and trade unions in Britain disliked them, and women were paid much less compared to men. Nonetheless, women made up a quarter of the workers by 1917. Europe after the war. After the war ended, Europe saw major territorial changes from both the Treaty of Versailles and the collapse of previous empires, such as the Austro Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. Alsace Lorraine was given back to the French. Germany was split into two, divided by the new Poland, who now has access to the Baltic Sea. Czechoslovakia was born, as well as Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Germany, Austria, and Hungary lost lots of land, while Turkey replaced the Ottoman Empire. The Lost Generation. The term lost generation was used to describe the situation after the war had ended. The traditional ideas of war's nobility and heroism in war faded. The depiction of the glorious wars in art and literature disappeared. Moreover, 9 million soldiers were killed, and more were permanently disabled because of the war. In France alone, 20% of all between the age 20 to 41 died. German hyperinflation. To pay for the huge reparations of war by the Treaty of Versailles, the German government had no choice but to print more money, which caused inflation. To balance the efforts of the inflation, salaries were raised, which meant the government had to print out even more money, creating a loop of hyperinflation. A piece of bread that would cost 250 marks in January of 1923 would cost 2,100 million marks in the November of the same year. Some even used marks as a substitute of paper because it was much cheaper at the time. The rise of Adolf Hitler. Though Hitler was just an ordinary frontline soldier during World War I, his experience greatly shaped his beliefs. Upon defeat, Hitler was convinced that Germany ought to be a supremely powerful nation and therefore could not believe that losing war could be Germany's fault. Like many others, he believed that Germany had been betrayed by the politicians. The Treaty of Versailles made Hitler and many others felt that Germany was treated unfair. The new Weimar government also faced enormous problems. Unhappy people wanted a leader who could make Germany strong again, and Hitler firmly believed that he could be this man.